Thank you and welcome everyone to the APEN webinar for April 2022. I'd like to welcome Denise Bewsell as our presenter this evening, today. Denise is a joint recipient of our Extension Award for Excellence this year. And Denise is going to speak on small group-based extension and the overlooked art of facilitation. Now, Denise is a senior research manager for Scarlatti in Christchurch, New Zealand. She's worked in the primary sector for over 25 years, spanning both Australia and New Zealand, and in many roles, including as an extension officer, as a facilitator, as a researcher in extension, as an extension program designer, and as an evaluator. She also, apart from her obsession of love with chocolate, is part of the team providing us with enablers of change videos, which I recommend to all extension professionals to have a look at. So Denise, I'd like to hand over to you.
Awesome, thanks Graham. And I realised I should have checked this before we started, but do we have until Q2 or is that, yes, cool, excellent, brilliant. Make sure we pace ourselves. Kia ora. No, my haere mai, thank you very much. It's great. Welcome along. It's great to see you all. As Graham mentioned, I'm based in Christchurch, Ōtautahi, here in the South Island of New Zealand. So if you are anything like me, and you can vaguely picture New Zealand, so it's the bottom island on the right-hand side, about a third of the way down. There's a little sticky out bit, which is the Banks Peninsula. We're just in there. Very nice part of the world, big sky, view of the mountains, especially on a day like today when there's a beautiful blue sky. It's definitely heading into autumn though, getting quite cold, frosty overnight. We had to bring our pumpkins in. So yeah, definitely the change of season. So yeah, as Graham said, I have an obsession with chocolate. So I have not cracked the ability to share chocolate with you. So I'm just going to torture you by showing you some New Zealand Whittaker's chocolates that you may or may not be able to get where you are. But I recommend these ones, any of the dark ones in particular. I was saying the Hawke's Bay Black Doris Plum and Roasted Almond, or the Fijian Ginger and Keri Keri Mandarin are two of my personal favorites. But then, you know, Marlborough Sea Salt, Heather, you know the Marlborough Sea Salt is good. And caramel riddle with saffron is also very good. You'll notice they're dark chocolate. I'm definitely a dark chocolate fan. And I was unfortunately hearing that over in Australia, the Whittaker's Cocoa Pods haven't made it. They are milk chocolate, but they've got inside, they're like shaped like a cocoa pod, but inside they've got hazelnut. What's the word for it? You know, like a hazelnut and chocolate mix. They are absolutely superb. So I've tortured you a little bit with chocolate, and I could give you a whole lot more information about that. If you really wanted to plumb the depths of my obsession with chocolate. I got a message from a colleague this morning, and she's like, oh, have you heard of this chocolate place? I'm like, yep, been there, bought the chocolate, know it's really good. They keep on trying to find places that I haven't been to, but not yet, haven't found one. Anyway, so today wanted to thank Lab and Jeanette, who were my who nominated me for this award, and really appreciate it. I know that I'm conscious that I was part of a larger team within the Red Meat Profit Partnership. It was a really cool and opportunity and such a privilege to be involved in the Red Meat Profit Partnership program and get that extension kind of stuff all happening, which is now being ably taken over and run by Beef and Lamb New Zealand. And Maria, you're the sole representative, so you may have some questions directed your way at some point. But yeah, it's real cool. So just really keen to highlight that I was part of a team. We did some really cool stuff, and I am going to share a little bit about background to the program, focus on the facilitation, because it came up as a key success factor. So spoiler alert, that's hence the title of this, and then finish with things that you've heard that might be similar or different to what you're doing. So yeah, so first part, wanted to start, give you a bit of background about Red Meat Profit Partnership, RMPP, and the Action Network, of which many action groups were part of that action network. So I think a few people may have heard a few things about RMPP and about Action Network or action groups. I'm going to just, if you haven't, that's also all good. You're in the right place. We will talk about it. But if you have heard anything, I'll just give you a minute to have a think about what you might have heard, what you know about it. And I'll just, yeah, give you a minute to have a think about that. And then I'm going to get you to pop some stuff in the chat box. And Peter, I'm sorry, I've just read your message. I am looking for a commission from Whittaker's. I keep promoting their product. I'll just give you 30 seconds to have a think about what you might have already heard. Awesome, and I can see that a few people are chucking some things in the chat, so I'd love you to open up your chat box and just type in anything that you can think of that you've heard about the program, know about it. Heather and Maria, you have a definite head start on this, so. But fisheries, you got in first. Nathan and Damien, good stuff. Small group based extension with farmers, very cool. Yep, and Patricia, you're saying too, farmer focused small groups. Graham, you're saying working with groups of producers to improve red meat quality. Well, originally that was part of the program, and some of the focus for the initial different players in the industry to get together to come up with RMPP. But in the end, for Action Network and the action groups, it wasn't always the focus and wasn't pushed as the focused. So because action groups were small group farmer focused, farmers could choose what they wanted to look at, what they wanted to explore. And so quality wasn't necessarily part of it, but other parts of the program did look at meat quality. And I'm thinking of particular one of the meat processor partners, in fact, Melissa Sowden from Silver Fern Farms, who got the runner-up prize. She did some awesome work, led a whole program of extension around beef eating quality for Silver Fern Farms, and did some awesome stuff with that in that extension space. So there was a definite part of that in the Red Meat Profit Partnership, but for action groups, it was really up to farmers. What else have we got there? Action groups, sheep and beef farmers, absolutely, Heather, very important point. This was focused at sheep and beef farmers here in New Zealand. We had a few deer farmers kind of sneak into that as part of it, because often they're sheep and beef farmers as well. We did have a few dairy farmers get involved, sometimes as part of groups that were looking at things like calves and integrating calves into the beef production system. But mostly it was around sheep and beef farmers, and that was the idea. Because it was Red Meat Profit Partnership and Action Network for red meat. So Heather, you've also put in facilitation rather than expert-led groups, and absolutely, it was about that farmer focus, farmer-driven, farmer deciding, and so the key thing was that we wanted a facilitator for each group, and they worked with farmers to decide on the focus, worked with farmers to decide, you know, if they needed an expert, who that expert could be, because it could be a local farmer, it could be, you know, one of their peers, it could be a farmer from outside the district, just as much as an expert in inverted commas, as in a researcher or a say a seed company rep or a fertilizer rep or anything like that. So yeah, if you think about that expert as being a very broad definition, quite important, but it was facilitator, facilitated and farmer driven or farmer led. Peter, you're saying ongoing relationships established. Do you mind unmuting and just telling us a little bit about tell me more about what you mean there?
It's in contrast to coming along to a one-day field day or a one-day workshop. They're growing relationships with both the facilitator and their fellow peer farmers.
Yeah, no, awesome. Thank you, Peter. Brilliant. Yeah, and it was about trying to build up a relationship and an environment over time that meant that farmers could learn from each other. I see, Pat, you've put in applying peer-to-peer learning principles. Absolutely, because it was all about that peer-to-peer learning and sharing experiences, and coming up with that almost like a safe space, safe environment for going, actually, I don't know what to do, or, you know, I'm not sure, can I have some help? What else have people experienced? A lot of the feedback we got from farmers in the evaluation surveys was, I never realized other farmers had the same problem as I did, or, you know, couldn't deal with this, or that kind of thing. So yeah, it was pretty cool. What else have we got there? Thanks, Peter, for that. Maria, you've got, yes, decide their own focus. We didn't push the topic. Model, and Pat, we've talked about the peer-to-peer learning, very important kind of fundamental part of how the program was set up. Heather, model based on extensive research, absolutely. There was a whole part of the program, a pilot part, and some research that went on before we launched Action Network and the action groups to look at what was happening overseas, what was happening in different industries, what top farmers were doing, top performing farmers, what could we learn from those sheep and beef farmers who are at the top of their game, and come in on that. We ran pilot programs with the meat processor partners in Red Meat Profit Partnership to just get a bit of an idea of what was going on, and from there we came up with the model that underpinned the whole action group process. So yeah, based on extensive research. Thanks for that, Heather. And Carlin, you were saying, who's funded this program and did the farmers pay to be involved? That's a really good question, because basically Red Meat Profit Partnership was set up with the New Zealand government in the form of the Ministry of Primary Industries over here, and they have some funding that basically they said to industry, hey, if you've got some problem that you want to explore, but you know that you can't do the work or the research by yourself, then you could apply to this fund and partner with us. And most of the programs in this pot of money that were funded were single kind of or a couple of organisations at most. So there was work done in the dairy sector with Fonterra and Dairy NZ. There was work done in various industries, I think even fishing, Nathan and Damien. I think there was a couple of primary growth partnerships that were actually focused on that. But the red meat sector basically said, hey, we need to kind of get a few more people in the room. And so there were 6 meat processor partners. There were 2 banks, Rabo and ANZ, the industry body, so Beef and Lamb New Zealand, that Maria is part of, and they all just said, we'll put money and time, so funding, actual funding dollars, but also some in-kind resource in, and the government matched that funding. So it was $64 million over 7 years, or actually ended up being 7.5 years because they gave us an extra 6 months because of COVID. So it ran from 2013 through to end of 2013 through to March 2021. So Carlin, farmers didn't have to pay to be part of the groups, but that was something we basically set it up so that it was transparent, the money and the funding that was involved in funding the group. And as a group with their facilitator, they were expected to work through how much things were going to cost, all of that kind of stuff. So we were trying to be transparent about the funding and how that worked, but they didn't have to pay. Now they do still get a little bit of tiny bit of seed funding from Beef and Lamb New Zealand, but because the program ended, that money is no longer there, so it couldn't continue in the same form. Any last things that people wanted to chuck in before I finish off this section just by showing you an evaluation snapshot, which hopefully gives you a bit more of an overview of the program. Feel free to chuck anything in the chat. Otherwise, let me show you this. Hopefully you can see that. So every quarter, we, as a team, the Action Network team, we put together a snapshot of what was happening. And this was based on, just some of our mandatory reporting, like, you know, how many people were turning up, how many groups, all of that kind of stuff, but also drawing on some of our evaluation that got set up. And you can see here, we were trying to kind of describe the program in that kind of green wedge in the middle. We were trying to move around towards outputs. So, you know, the output level kind of information through to outcomes to give a bit of a feel for what was happening with the program. So let's start on the green wedge. At the end of the program, we had 229 action groups working across New Zealand. So that's groups of 7 to 9 farm businesses working together with a facilitator. There were 96 approved facilitators, or 96 active facilitators that were working with them. Just under 2,000 farm businesses in action groups. And Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've got roughly 11,000 sheep and beef farmers, roughly commercial. So yeah, that gives you a bit of a sense of how many got involved, which was good. On average, not quite 2.5 groups per facilitator, so that we had quite a number of facilitators who facilitated more than one group, but a few that just had one. So that just gives you a bit of an idea of the scale of the program. And the map on that bottom right-hand side, you can see you've got action groups. The number of action groups is the top number. So very top of New Zealand there, you can see there were 12. In the middle, in the Waikato Bay of Plenty kind of area, there was 32, and so on through. And then the number of facilitators that were available in those regions, you can see is the bottom number. We even had one group over in the Chatham Islands, for those of you who might not realise that's still part of New Zealand, and they're still going, which is very cool. You can see there that there was a whole range of different topics that farmers focused on, everything from soils, feed management through to animal performance, and a heap more environmentally focused groups by the end of the program, which was really cool to see. And at the time, about 40%, but over 40% of the groups were continuing and self-funding to continue to be part of, to continue to be an action group. Roughly a quarter had disestablished, and the rest were working through what they wanted to do, which was quite cool. What else can we see there? One of the key things in terms of costs, you can see that 58% of the money given to action groups went on facilitation, 29% roughly to facilitate experts, and then we had a small amount for disbursements, haul hire, you know, all of that kind of stuff, travel for facilitators or experts. So it gives you an idea of the spend. The key thing for me in that bottom left of the circle is at the group support, and we've talked about that peer-to-peer learning and how important that was. 37% said that group support was really valued at the start of an action group. So the first survey they got as they started their action group, after 2 years, that was up to 50%. And so you can see that, yeah, just having that safe group environment really helped farmers feel comfortable, be able to ask questions, all of those kinds of good things. Yeah, I think I'll stop at this point and just and check in for questions. So feel free to unmute and ask any questions either on this or anything I've said so far before we move on to focus on facilitation.
Sorry, Denise, can you give an overview of the successful, success indicator? What was the outcome of all of this?
Yeah, so the idea, the indicator for success for Red Meat Profit Partnership overall as a program was that there had been an increase in productivity and profitability for sheep and beef farms across New Zealand. So we were our board was very heavily invested in us monitoring what was actually happening in terms of dollars basically on the ground. And you can see at the very top of that circle, we did, based on our evaluation, we did some modeling, we did some case studies. That evaluation is based on the impact modeling using the case studies and other evaluation data, which said that basically if your farmer was getting involved in action groups, they were getting an extra $24 per hectare per year, or roughly $20,000 for an average farm per annum. So that was a really key metric for Red Meat Profit Partnership because of the profit in the name. From our point of view, one of our key metrics in the team was that group support and seeing that peer-to-peer model actually working and hearing and seeing the results of that farmers felt supported, were building their confidence to be able to manage change they're choosing, change that's being forced on them. Great question. Yeah.
Sorry, just to follow up. So were there follow-on benefits of, rather than profit, you know, particularly around creating that social capital? Did you quantify or qualify those at all?
We didn't quantify them in terms of dollars or anything. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, just how you...
Yeah, no, oh, sorry.
Whether you evaluated those other social capital benefits.
We certainly were, in terms of qualitatively and quantitatively. You can see changes in, we were monitoring changes in motivation, knowledge, skills and attitude. We were measuring that value of group support, so we could come up with those percentages, but not quantitatively, as in, you know, that you get an extra $25 worth of stuff based on that increase in confidence. So if anything, I'd say we were probably underselling the benefits of being involved in an action group based on the evaluation. If you are interested in more detail on that, I will flick at the end of this the site where we've got a whole lot of our end of final reports, and there's some qualitative, quantitative stuff in there if you're keen. Yep. Anyone else got a, thank you. Anyone else got a quick question?
Denise, Graham here. There's a question there from Peter in regards to the attrition rates of groups. That is farmers joining and leaving. Have you any thought indications about that? Yeah,
it was definitely something that we kept an eye on, and it was rough. It was a bit over 5%. It didn't get to 10%, but it was somewhere hovering between those two. Peter. Yeah, basically that was something we did keep an eye on, and it was interesting. There was lots of reasons for some of those. Sometimes farmers just ended up in the wrong group. Sometimes groups were forced together and they just never gelled, and the facilitator didn't work. Yeah, there was lots of different reasons. Sometimes groups formed for a couple of years and then they went, we've solved our problem. We don't need to keep going. We can move on. That's a good question. Yeah.
I had a question, Denise,
yes.
which was what, and you may cover it later, what's the future of the groups now that the funding ceased? Has there been, what's I guess, the next step?
Yeah, so we spent quite a bit of time with some of the groups, depending on whether they wanted to keep going in some way, shape or form, supporting them to either have the discussions around would they self-fund or would they look for funding elsewhere. But Beef and Lamb New Zealand basically put it out there to all action groups that they would provide a small amount of money, a couple of $1,000s each year for an action group to access, to kind of give them, I don't know, Maria, is it like, it's like a little incentive, a little kind of, you know, draw card for staying in the program, and give you basically a free meeting at least once a year for your action group, because that would cover the costs of doing that. So Beef and Lamb New Zealand through Olivia Weatherburn is still providing support for facilitators, and therefore through them to groups, and through their everyday contact with farmers as well.
So Denise, the facilitators, they were paid facilitators,
yes.
And they obviously had to undertake training to you know,
yes.
some consistency in approach. I guess you're going to cover.
We are. So can I hold that thought? And if we don't cover it, I'm just writing it down. Training and facilitators. Cool. Because we'll come to that, Graham, if that's right. Cool.
Excellent. Alrighty,
I'm going to keep going. And thanks, Peter. I see your 5 to 10% is great. Yeah, we were pretty happy with that too. I think it was, you know, a combination of timing. We had awesome facilitators involved who kept groups going and worked really hard. So yeah, I think there was a combination of things happening there. And Heather, any thoughts you've got on that, feel free to pipe up or chuck something in the chat. What I thought I was going to do now, for something a little bit different for the next 10, 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, so that we've got time at the end, is play a little bit of Popcorn PowerPoint. I don't know if anyone has done this before. Woohoo, there we go. All right. So the only trouble with saying, has anyone done this before? And then I go to full screen sharing is that I can only see some of you. But anyway, if you've done this before, awesome, you'll know what's happening. If you haven't, Popcorn PowerPoint is this idea that I have 12 slides around the facilitation of action groups and the focus on facilitation. We're not going to get to all 12, but we're going to pick a few out. Each of the slides is numbered 1 to 12. I'm going to get you guys to start picking numbers, and we'll just flick to that slide and we'll discuss that slide, have a look at it, figure it out, and then move on to a different number, and just as a bit of a different way of doing things. So Graham, I'm going to nominate you for the first slide number. So can you pick a number between 1 and 12, please?
6.
6. Okay, let's go to slide 6. Oh, excellent. So this slide is there to remind me to talk about the facilitator as the conductor of an action group. So yeah, anyone want to unmute and talk about what you think of when you think about a conductor?
Hi Denise, Pat here.
Oh, hi. Hi, Pat.
Having just been to 2 symphony concerts in the last couple of weeks, right?
Yes.
I found the conductor with his baton was leading the orchestra, but involving them or bringing them in as a team and to use their specific talents.
Yeah, perfect. I love that description, Pat. That's brilliant. Nathan, Damien, you just unmuted to say something? You want to add to that?
Oh yeah, the key word is involving and creating a generative discussion, I suppose, or one that builds like music does. So it's all in coordination.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And that's exactly what we were I guess the thinking and the culture we were trying to grow, push, facilitate, support as part of Action Network, that as a facilitator, all of those words you just used, that was exactly what you were doing with an action group. Yeah, Peter, had you unmuted to add something?
To make sure that all parts of the orchestra are involved. I mean, you don't leave, a quiet person just sitting there, because odds on they've got just as much to contribute to somebody else who speaks first.
Yeah, so true. And I think it's just an awesome picture of how, as a facilitator, we can do the most good and have the most impact. And for many action groups, this was everything rose and fell on the facilitator doing that job. Like you say, Peter, making sure that everyone was involved. And Pat and Damien and Nathan, you guys have nailed it too. So Heather, I'm going to just check, as a facilitator of an action group, anything you'd add to that picture of facilitator as conductor?
I think from my perspective as a facilitator, being recognised and respected for what skills a facilitation could bring was so different in the New Zealand sheep and beef scene, because it always used the experts. So the experts were the consultants or the person who came in and told everyone, where to be respected for those skills to bring people together was really a huge transformational change within extension in the sheep and beef sector.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. That's awesome. So true. I think we underestimated the cultural change and shift that was involved with facilitators in the sheep and beef sector, or those wanting to facilitate. So I don't think we nailed this by any means, but we certainly pushed it and hopefully got a little bit further. And Sarah, I saw you've just added in the chat box, and in tune, so important. Yeah, that have we all bought into the same goal and vision for where we want the group to go? That kind of stuff is what I'm thinking of with the in tune thing. Brilliant. Thank you all for your contributions there, because I think you've summed it up well. Graham, can you nominate someone else to pick a number between 1 and 12, but not 6, because we've already done it?
I will select one of our fisheries guys.
Oh, excellent. So fisheries, who wants to choose a number?
Go, Nathan.
Number 2.
Number 2. All righty. Thanks, Nathan. Brilliant. All right, number 2. Let's go back to number 2. Oh, this is cool. So you might be interested in the different types of facilitators. So like what were they doing as well as facilitating an action group? And you can see there we had quite a lot of farm consultants, which kind of makes sense, although throws up the kinds of challenges that Heather just talked about, because often as a farm consultant, you are you're paid for your expertise. So there's a little bit of tension there and things to work through. So it didn't always work, I have to say, but we had some excellent facilitators who were also farm consultants. You can see that we had vets, environmental consultants, farmers, bankers, yeah, right down to industry reps. So a couple of people from the meat companies were involved. We had, Beef and Lamb New Zealand people, so that kind of stuff. So yeah, any questions or comments about that?
Yeah, Graham here, Denise. I'm somewhat surprised at the range there. Obviously, there were a lot there. 19% vets.
Yeah, I know.
How'd that go?
Well, on the whole, well, no, okay, so there's a few ifs and buts. We've got another Beef and Lamb funded, Maria, correct me again if I'm wrong, program called Wormwise that vets are very heavily involved in. Okay. And some vets have done a fair bit of training in facilitation and that kind of stuff. So some of them were already thinking in this facilitation type space. And so for those vets, it wasn't a stretch to kind of get involved in action groups and that kind of stuff. For other vets, it was still a challenge, but I have to say most of them rose to that occasion and embraced even groups that decided that animal health wasn't their thing. But we did have a few groups that were focused around animal health type issues. So yeah, I think they're kind of like farm consultants. You have to come with the right kind of mindset.
And Graham, again, I think it's great the 6% farmers.
Yeah, I know.
And they volunteered themselves, and that's encouraging.
Yeah, that was just part of the deal. We basically, anyone who wanted to be a facilitator needed to attend a couple of training workshops, and we'd support them and help them. And if they were keen, they came along, and that was part of the deal. Cool. Any other quick questions or comments before I get Nathan to nominate the next person to choose a number?
There is a question that Roy Murray Pryor has. Did they receive guidance on facilitation up front?
She answered that, I think, didn't you?
Yep. I did try to, but was it all good? They did. We basically helped them with some training and support. Yeah. All right, thank you.
There was a question about whether there are any from government.
Oh, that's a really good question.
Shove them in other.
Yeah, I'm trying to mentally think. I think the short answer is no. Yeah, I think the short answer is no. That's probably reflects the New Zealand Extension environment and those involved. So
yeah, that's what I would have thought. It's probably a reflection of that compared to what we have in some areas of Australia.
Absolutely. Cool. Nathan, did you want to nominate?
I'll go down the list. Patricia.
Patricia. Pat, tell us another number, not 2 or 6, because we've done those.
4.
4. Okay. Let's see. Oh, Facilitator drawbacks. This is a nice follow-up. Lower ratings of action groups were often associated with weaker facilitation, and that's when the feedback we were getting from farmers was that facilitators were perceived to be disorganized or lack good communication. That kind of thing was happening, or they weren't pulling farmers into line, they weren't managing tensions between achieving outcomes but not pushing the group too hard, reading the group. So there was just a breakdown in that facilitation space. So yeah, thoughts or comments or questions on that?
Yeah, I've got one, Denise. With these facilitation drawbacks, the facilitation issues that you uncovered, how did you deal with them? You know, did you have a mentoring system, or how did you manage?
Yeah, it's a great point, Heather. And we did have a mentoring system. I don't think we nailed it very well. We set up basically the training and support, and the support was having a facilitator who basically was there to kind of at least go to one meeting with a facilitator and kind of check them off, make sure they were okay after they'd been through the training and once they were in front of an action group. Where we were getting feedback from farmers, we tried to put some mentoring in place, and that did work for a couple of facilitators. It failed spectacularly for others, and I think it was a combination of things there we didn't nail. Getting the right people, showing the benefits for both parties, that kind of stuff. So Carlin, question you've got on that?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if this is where the dynamics of the expert came in as well. If someone was an expert, did they have trouble finding their facilitator role? Could have this caused some of these issues?
We separated the expert role from the facilitator role. So I think that was a little bit separate. We certainly had feedback about some experts that no matter what facilitators and groups tried to do, the experts were like, no, I'm telling you what to do. Most experts worked really well in that environment with a facilitator, but not all.
Probably more the facilitators who were actually experts. So probably obviously 36% were farm consultants.
Good point.
Some of them are more expert than others, but you know what I mean? Like they've got a agenda to push as such.
Yes, no, and I think you're spot on. For many, that was definitely, that was the issue. It's hard separating out that expert hat from a facilitator hat. So, yeah. And I see, Pat, you've put in how to deal with difficult farmers, because yes, that also happened. We had one or two groups where the group and the facilitator just never gelled. And it wasn't that the group wasn't a good group, because they were focused, they had a vision, they knew what they wanted to do. And it wasn't that the facilitator wasn't any good, because we had observed and worked with them, but it just the dynamics of that relationship never really worked. And so in which case we helped supported the farmer group to bring in a different facilitator, because it was their choice. But dealing with difficult farmers, always an interesting one. Alrighty, go Pat.
Denise, even though that was the farmers, the difficult farmers, you could also, you said you brought in a new facilitator. You would have needed to have given some support to the facilitator afterwards.
Yes, correct. Yep, helping them, making sure. And we did have a series of webinars, regional get-togethers, a few things like that to try and help support facilitators as groups, but also we did try and do some of that one-on-one stuff as well as a team supporting them. Thanks. So yeah.
Anyhow, thank you for that. And I'll choose Carlin to take the next number.
Lovely, thank you. And then we'll have to, after this one, we'll have to finish because we're running out of time.
Number 11.
Oh, number 11. Okay, let's see what number 11 brings us. Oh, yeah. So I think this supports kind of something that we've been talking about, that the answers are in the room, not from me as a facilitator. And Byron is an awesome facilitator. He's from Rabobank. So he definitely wears a specialist hat, an expert hat when it comes to finance, business planning, all of that kind of stuff. But he really embraced that facilitator role and the training to be able to conduct a group and do it well. So yeah, but it's good to hear it in their words rather than us just saying it.
Denise, a follow on from that from Graham here.
Yep.
The people who act as facilitators, have they, especially those we're not used to seeing as facilitators, have they sort of indicate an interest to continue on in this type of work themselves, or yeah?
Some, but not all. So yeah, it depended, and some of the vets, for example, their practices were thinking about this space, how to add value to farmer clients, and maybe this was a way of exploring it. And yeah, trying out the lay of the land. For some people, I think they genuinely went into it going, I think I can be a good facilitator, but after a while they realized, actually, I am more of an expert. I'm not so much of a facilitator, but that's a good thing to know. So yeah, it really depended on the facilitator. I am actually going to just very quickly finish with one slide, which is totally not popcorn PowerPoint at all, but just to pick up on the point that you asked about, Graham, which was the training for facilitators. So there was two workshops that we did. So the first one that's kind of on the left-hand side, that was the Facilitating Learning and Change, which is still going. Beef and Lamb New Zealand still run that one for facilitators. It's basically, yeah, about facilitation, how we learn, understanding how to design for learning. So that was a 2-day workshop that facilitators needed to do. And then the second workshop was Action Network Fundamentals and Extension Design, which was building on the first workshop, Facilitating Learning and Change, but focused, and so trying to reinforce some of those facilitation skills, but then basically taking people through the action network and action group requirements and processes and all of that kind of stuff. So those were the two kind of key things that needed to happen. Yeah, there's so much more I could say. I had 12 slides and we've done 4 of them, but that is all good. The final thing I wanted to do was just to get you to jump into Jamboard to finish up and get you to start thinking about what you've heard that's similar in your context and what you've heard that is a little bit different. And so I'm going to chuck into the chat box a link to a Jamboard. If you haven't ever used Jamboard before, it's relatively straightforward, but have a go. So click the link. If you're on a device, it's probably harder, so don't worry. And when you click the link, hopefully you get to see something like this. Oh, there's a few people joining. So I just wanted to give you 30 seconds, a minute. If you come over here on the left-hand side to this little sticky note, you can write yourself a sticky note, save it, and then pull it over either towards a difference or a similarity of what you've been hearing with what you do. So I'll give you a few moments to have a think about that and chuck some stuff on the Jamboard. If you're not feeling very confident with the Jamboard, feel free to chuck it in the chat and I'll transfer it onto the Jamboard. Ooh. Yep, nice. Facilitation is king. I so agree. Just keep pulling them down. Yep, nice. Anything else that's coming up? Yeah, we're pretty proud of the fact that we managed to get although I can't say that we can claim it completely, the diversity and facilitator backgrounds. It was pretty cool. You don't always see that. I think it was the fact that we hadn't had anything like this in the red meat sector for a while. As Heather said, facilitation really hadn't been valued or recognised in quite the same way as in other sectors. So yeah, for some reason the Jamboard, yes, thank you. Just pull them apart. Give you a couple more moments just to add anything on there. Cool to hear it's similar in the grain sector and pulses in New Zealand and New South Wales. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it was a kind of once in a moment opportunity. I feel the Red Meat Profit Partnership and the amount of money that got put. We didn't, I should say the $64 million for Red Meat Profit Partnership, roughly 12 million of that was allocated to the extension program work, of which Action Network was part of. And so we definitely didn't take up that $64 million for action groups. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and I think that's cool. Facilitation is king. Technical expert may not be the best facilitator. Absolutely. Understanding that difference between facilitator and expert, I think, is a key part of it. Getting banks to invest also, a difference. Okay, right, cool. So a few differences there, a few similarities. That's always fascinating because, yeah, I think we learn from what's similar and what's different. So anyone like to make a comment on what they're seeing on the Jamboard before we finish up? No, I've worn them all out, Graham.
Sorry, Denise. I'm just trying to catch up with the chat, check what's in there.
Yeah, yep, no, that's all good. I couldn't see anything.
Nothing else there. No, that's right. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Heather. Is it?
I think I was just going to make an observation that just been sitting here listening, that this was about the whole program. Sorry, I'll come off. So my internet's a bit dodgy today. I'll put the video back on. Must be windy, so we haven't got internet today. I think that you all wanted to know how strongly facilitation came out, I think. I mean, the program was this big, but the thing that held it all together, that was the spoke in the middle, was the facilitation. And I'm really surprised how strongly that's come out of all the things that could have been discussed today. I think the facilitation, that hub in the wheel.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's a reflection of our evaluation, because that's really what showed up, that things rose and fell on the facilitation, and we learnt so much. We didn't nail all of the support. We didn't nail getting that, really building the culture completely. There were so many things we could have done to help build that more. But in spite of that, the groups that were successful hummed because of the facilitators that were involved and the work that they did. And absolutely the farmers were amazing and, all part of all of that. But yeah, it really did rise and fall on facilitation. So.
Denise, a question from Graham. Just approximately, what sort of group sizes are we talking about, numbers of people that were actually
so there was anything from 9 through to 18, 20 individuals, because we basically based it on farm businesses, and the idea was that that more than one person from a farm business came along to the group. 7 to 9 farm businesses, so it varied depending on how many people in each farm business came along to the group.
And so that leads to the second question, out of curiosity. Did we get it was quite frequent to have more than one person from the farm business there?
So it varied. The more successful groups tended to have a mix of people from farm businesses. It wasn't a hard and fast thing. And I have to say that kind of goes back to that cultural shift for facilitators as well. Getting more than one person from the farm business, focusing on the farm team, was a bigger cultural shift than we gave it credit for as well. So yeah, it was still definitely a work in progress. And I see, Peter, you've got a question there. I'll just very quickly, the other things that were really important were, if you can look, I don't know if you can see in the top right there, the 6 influential success factors. You can see effective facilitation is one of them. The farmer focus was critical, peer-to-peer learning, support, and that meant like program support, back office support, just having people to help with that, and structure with flexibility. So we tried as much as possible to say, here's the sandbox, play in the sandbox. You've got lots of movement in the sandbox, but there's still a boundary and there's still some structure. But most of all, there was a lot of that connection. And it was connecting farmers with other farmers, farmers with experts, groups with resources. There was that connection was kind of a key, other key issues to get right. So that's probably the simplest answer, Peter.
Denise, Graham here again. Just a follow up on that comment. Were you able to identify development of new connections and connectivity between farms that may not have existed previously, or is that a little bit beyond where you are?
It was a little bit beyond what we could do, but the evaluation certainly drew out connections between farmers that they, that comment about, I didn't realize others had the same problem that I did. So that indicating those connections. What we also heard from some experts and some facilitators was that it was growing their business. So farmers that they wouldn't have otherwise normally been in front of, wouldn't have had as clients, all of a sudden there was that connection and growth of business opportunities and that one-on-one work stuff that was happening. So yeah, so anecdotally, yes, not enough formally in terms of our evaluation. So
okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Look,
yeah, conscious of time.
You want to finish it?
Yeah, that's right. I do. I just want to put in the chat box a link, which is basically all the final reports. And so if you're interested in more detail, there is an Action Network final report in there, but there's also some other ones. So head to that website. You'll get heaps of details. I'm happy to take any questions. Please feel free to email me, give me a call, whatever. I'm very happy to have a chat. And Heather's asking, did farmers get involved who hadn't been involved in it?
In the past, it's just my dodgy spelling. Farmers who hadn't been involved in industry activities. Weren't there farmers who got involved in Action Network who had nothing to do with anything in the past?
Absolutely, yes. We reckon at least a third, if not more, of the farmers that got involved had never been involved before, or very rarely. So yeah, that was pretty huge.
That's a good number.
And that's not to us. Like the testament of that is not about us. It's the connectors, all of those rural professionals who are involved as facilitators and experts, and the farmers that they had connections with that we wouldn't have otherwise ever got to. So great point, Heather. Thanks.
Excellent, excellent. Sorry, I will have to pull up. We've all probably got another meeting at 3 o'clock.
Right. So. Exactly.
Or our 3 o'clock. I'd like to thank Denise for your presentation. It was engaging and enjoyable and different than the usual, which is always good. So I think that's good for us to note how that was presented as well too. I like the popcorn presentation. I might try that with the Department of Ag, Water and Environment tomorrow, but I don't know if that'll.
Go for it. Go for it.
Go for it. Yeah, they're giving us an hour of their time when they're visiting from Canberra, so it's a work in progress. Okay. So look, I'd like to thank you for all your efforts and putting that forward. Again, congratulations once more on the joint winning of the Extension Professional Award. It was well deserved, and I love the way that you acknowledge the whole team in that too as well. That's really important also, and all the work that we do. I'd like to thank everyone here for your participation today. There will be a copy of this made available hopefully by the end of the week, so we can pass it on to others. And as I said before, look forward to catching up with you all again in a couple of months' time. If not at the APEN Book Club meeting, which will be next month, I assume, in the alternate month to our webinars. And again, a big thank you to the fisheries guys for participation. It's great to see you there, and look forward to further engagement. We might look forward to having a webinar presentation about extension in fisheries sometime in the future. It'll be great.
Sounds like an awesome idea. Thanks, Graham.
Okay, thanks very much. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.